After a volatile 48 hours, Bitcoin has finally bounced from a $65,000 support, reaching 66.2k. Will Bitcoin continue upwards into the new week, or are the bears going to push Bitcoin down one final time? This is a question we're answering in today's video. Let's dive in. Okay, MegaWhale team, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you're all having a fantastic weekend. In today's video, we are doing a deep dive into the price action for Bitcoin, both on the short term and the macro charts, discussing exactly what has happened over the past 48 hours, what Bitcoin is currently doing, and the next probable moves and key levels you should be paying attention to. Alongside this, we'll be briefly going over the altcoin market, discussing the total 3 and Bitcoin dominance. Before we do get into it, smash that like button, hit that comment button, and subscribe to the channel. We post daily videos for Bitcoin focusing on the facts, the data, the technical and the structural information. No hype, no BS, no emotion, pure raw TA. If that is the kind of content you are interested in, join us on Telegram. We post daily updates with charts, analysis, videos, educational posts, economic news, and so much more to keep you in the loop of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and all of the relevant, important information. You'll also get access to everything else we have to offer, but if you're interested in joining our VIP channel where we post exclusive trading setups, analysis, and much more, you have to go ahead and contact me in the pinned comment of the free channel by clicking my name or these links for more information. Aside from just getting access to our VIP, you'll also get access to our group chats, our general chat, trading chart and education chat, news, daily video, help, and trade setup chat. So go ahead and check that out if that is what you're interested in. Let's dive into the video. So as we can see, over the past 24 to 48 hours, Bitcoin saw a breakdown of the range low, sitting at 67,000 of that short-term horizontal consolidation range we were seeing ever since we broke into it about 20 days ago. So we saw a flash correction liquidating a massive portion of the altcoin market and a large portion of Bitcoin's leveraged positions as we came down to retest that 65,000 to 64.5k region. As you can see, this was a support reversal region. Since then, we have seen a small bounce for Bitcoin, but we're really starting to plateau out here on the short term as Bitcoin has been consolidating mostly sideways now for the last 24 hours. So we'll be discussing what is happening here and what we're expecting next in just a moment. Taking a preliminary look at the market data, we can see on the market data, 24-hour volume has fallen off a cliff. We're looking at 63 billion. Down 52% over the last 24 hours. This is completely normal entering the weekend, so we aren't expecting any significant volume surges for at least the next 24 hours. Overall liquidations in the past 24 hours is down 82%, a testament to the lack of volatility and reduced volume. 38 million in total, 16 million coming from longs and 22 million coming from shorts. The DXY did close out a weekly candle green at 105.5. If we want to see a directional continuation for the DXY, we are looking for a break of our prior high points. Only that should send the DXY back up to 108, which is going to that yearly level of resistance. Until then, we are expecting possible continuations downward to 103. Just as 106 is the trigger point for directional continuations upwards, the 103 to 102 level is the trigger point for directional continuations downwards. Very much it's just chopping until there. The S&P 500 having a fantastic week over here, closing a weekly at a massive $5,502 over that 5,500 level, looking absolutely fantastic. Again, we are expecting the S&P 500 to eventually make its way up to that $6,000 level, provided our prior high, which is now our current support at 5,300, is able to sustain. So even if we do see a short-term correction to this level, we expect continuations upwards, just like we saw corrections as we came up to retest that prior high. We still saw those continuations upward for the S&P. The same here applies for the Dow Jones. However, the Dow Jones is lagging considerably. We can see we are still underneath that prior high. the high point the S&P 500 had already broken out of, and we are sitting above our prior low. If we see a break of that prior high, we are expecting directional continuations much higher, whereas if we break our prior low at 37.7, we would expect a high time frame downtrend to originate. That is it for the broader markets and important market information. Let's go ahead and jump into our Bitcoin analysis. Let's talk about what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing the weekly charts, the key levels to be paying attention to. We're going to be taking a look at the high time frame ranges and short-term ranges. We're going to be discussing the key trigger points and immediate short-term price action. Our current downtrends we are taking a look at on Bitcoin. We're going over Bitcoin dominance, and we are taking a look at the total 3 market caps. So before we get into it, a quick word from today's video sponsor, and we'll jump on in. I'd like to introduce our partner, BitUnix. BitUnix is a global, non-KYC, no country restriction exchange, making it a perfect exchange to trade on if you're from the USA, from Canada, the Netherlands, or just prefer to trade without KYC. This exchange is a futures and spot exchange with over 200 different trading pairs and some of the lowest fees in the game. If you sign up with my link down below, you'll get access to 15% off your trading fees, as well as an exclusive reward center where you can claim up to a multitude in USDT prizes. So go ahead and sign up with my link down below for 15% off, and I'll see you in there. Okay team, let's go ahead and jump into Bitcoin, and we are starting on these higher time frame charts, on the weekly, on the macro, and then jumping down to the smaller time frame. So to start off nice and simple, guys, sometimes the best thing to do when you're in doubt, when you're worried about the price action, when you are confused and uncertain, is simply zoom out your time frame, zoom out your perspective. A lot of people, particularly new traders, it would go a mile if they just jumped off the 5-minute chart, jumped off the hourly chart, and looked at the bigger picture. Look at your key levels. So this is going to be a macro chart. As we can see, Bitcoin has been in a very strong uptrend ever since those lows in January 2023. In this uptrend, we have been establishing bases of support, creating these higher lows as we have been pushing upwards. Technically, when we're looking at trends right now, what are we seeing? We are seeing exhaustion. But exhaustion doesn't necessarily mean we are in a high time frame downtrend. It is signifying a possible reversal, but possible reversals do not play out until the trigger points in which validates those reversals actually are activated. So in this instance, if we were to see a downtrend, if we wanted to see a high time frame downtrend for Bitcoin, and thus the end of this current uptrend and end of potential higher time frame targets, we would need to see our prior higher low lost. This higher low is sitting at a price point of $60,000 US. So on the high time frame perspective, we can say only when $60,000 is lost. We can see $60,000 is going to be the pi cycle high from the prior cycle. Only when $60,000 is lost on the weekly would we see the first indication of structural trend-based weakness that Bitcoin has seen since starting the uptrend in January 2023, guys. That is a massive piece of news. It is telling us that only if we break below this level would we officially enter a downtrend. What we are seeing here is sideways consolidation and likely accumulation before we continue higher. Now, that is being said, if we want to see a continuation higher, we also need to break through the upper trigger, which is sitting at 72,000. If we look at the S&P 500 as a prime example, think of it as this range, what we saw in the S&P 500. We have this upward continuation into reduced volume and volatility into a sideways consolidation with a base of support and neckline of resistance. The directional break determines the continuation. So it is only when we break these directional trigger points would we actually see the price action follow through on the higher time frame. Everything that happens between these points is simply just chop, and I'm very much unconcerned about any price action that develops between these two ranges. The concern comes from the altcoin positions, as Bitcoin pushes sideways, we see altcoins bleed off. So looking at the macro charts, Bitcoin is incredibly bullish, and while we remain above 60,000, it will be unwise to assume that Bitcoin is going to go down. The validations for the downward move have not been triggered. You can remain cautious and you can be exploring possibilities for corrections. That is perfectly proactive. That would be a wise thing to do to prepare and plan for all scenarios. But to say this is it, this is the top and Bitcoin's going down is a very, very bold statement. Until we break that higher low, we do not have confirmation. Just as in the 2021 high, we didn't have confirmation of a top over here. We had confirmation of a top when we saw deviation underneath that 2021 prior high. This was confirmation of the top, and this is when I flipped bearish, the 14th of November, targeting 18,000. It's only when we get those exact confirmation points can we say with certainty or higher degrees of confidence that reversals are in. And again, guys, this isn't me saying we're only going up. We are only going to continue upwards if we break through this neckline resistance, but it is me saying that in this moment, you should take a step back and look at the bigger picture, look at the high time frame. So all of that is very well and dandy, but we need to go ahead and validate some of these statements from a technical perspective, not just from a structural perspective. So looking at the macro charts, we can take a look at a very important set of indicators, which is going to be our macro weekly chart. We look at our vortex trend. Let's go ahead and get these charts up. So the vortex trend indicator, sorry, for some reason, it looks like the page refreshed itself. This is a good opportunity. I use the 40 and the 20. Those are my vortex trend settings, my vortex trend indicator settings. I had someone ask me about Ichimoku Cloud. Ichimoku Cloud settings are actually default settings. The only settings I do adjust are my vortex trend indicator. So we look at the vortex trend indicator over here. We can draw our downtrend, which is represented by this white diagonal trend line. If we go ahead and take a look at our pi cycle indicator and turn our highs on, what we notice is generally, and by generally I mean 3 out of the last 4 times, we have created pi cycle highs. The vortex trend indicator has retested our trend line. So we created a pi cycle high, we created a vortex trend indicator top. We created a pi cycle high, we created a vortex trend indicator top. We created a pi cycle high, we created a vortex trend indicator top. So what does this tell us? It tells us it is unlikely that we create a pi cycle high now, which would indicate a macro reversal. But remember, the pi cycle high doesn't indicate the top, it indicates a macro reversal, which generally marks a top. If 3 out of the last 4 times it has marked a top, okay? But not always, but it would indicate a macro reversal. So it is unlikely we see a pi cycle high while the vortex trend indicator has not reached its resistance. Moving over to another thing, if we take a look at the pi cycle indicator itself, we can see that there are 3 points of validation. The 3 points of validation I look for, and just to make this a little bit more visible, we'll change our pen to orange. The 3 points of validation we look for is at the moment, the prior all-time high, pi cycle high is being retested. We see a retest of the upper band of the pi cycle indicator. At the same time we see that, we see a break-in of the Ichimoku Cloud from the pi cycle lower band, and from that point onwards, we do not close a weekly candle below both the high short and low short EMAs of the pi cycle indicator. That is sitting at a price point of $60,000. So that goes ahead and confirms again, if we were to see a break of 60,000, we would lose the 150 SMA, which would indicate a macro reversal is taking place if we were to see that occur. So moving back to our charts over here, we can see in prior cycles, historically, we never see breakdowns of the 150 SMA, which is the pi cycle low short EMA, until after the pi cycle high. This whole movement upwards, we are above it until we break down, which again is indicated by the retest of the vortex trend. If we go to the prior cycle, again, exactly the same thing. We retest, okay? We are retesting the upper band as we retest the prior high. We are above the EMAs the entire way up until we create a pi cycle high, which is when we retest the vortex trend indicator, and that is when the macro reversal takes place. So none of those things have actually occurred yet, and therefore we cannot say we have seen the top for Bitcoin because these traditional top indicators have not triggered off. What we are seeing is we are seeing a massive reduction in momentum, volatility, and volume at a high point after a surge of volatility. We have seen a surge of volatility, and then we have seen immediate drawn out and quite long consolidation. It is natural for the volatility, which is a representation of the average volatility over a period of time, to be decreasing. But that decreasing volatility is not necessarily an indication that the price is going into a downtrend, more so than it's just a representation of a change in volatility from a large period of volatility to a period of not so much, which is represented in a averaged out downtrend. So it's important to contextualize what you are seeing on the charts as well from a technical basis into what the price charts are doing. Let's go down to a short-term time frame. Taking a look at Bitcoin over here, guys, like we've said, there is a lot going on, and although Bitcoin has bounced on the short term, the bounce has not been enough yet to really drive back confidence that Bitcoin is going to continue aggressively upwards. So let's go ahead and talk about a few things. Number one, there is one particular pattern I'm looking out for that may or may not occur. This is a theory, this is just an idea, but if it does trigger, we will have confirmation of that. So what we have seen in the past, we saw this higher time frame channel. Okay, this higher time frame channel, what I'll do is refresh my page. For some reason, it's not loading. This is going to be our high time frame channel right over here. Let's just zoom back out. As you can see, we have our range high, which is represented as the trigger point. This range high over here is going to be the upper range high of the weekly chart, okay? And our range low is going to be the lower range on the weekly chart. This is the range we are looking at the weekly chart, just zoomed in. What we can see is we had a high time frame range, a retest of high, retest of low, retest of high, retest of low, and deviation, and then swing to high. What we have seen on the short term, we saw a range high retest, range low retest, range high retest, deviation under the low, and possible swing to high. So what are we seeing? We may be seeing a fractal repeat of this cluster of price action happening again over here, but on a smaller scale. I'm not saying this is exactly what's happening. We need to see a break back in and above 72,300 to confirm deviation, but as of right now, it is a possibility. So if we see a break back into this range, okay, which is going to be at 67,300, 67,300, if we break this level of resistance, we would have validated this drop as deviation, and therefore we are likely to continue back up to the range high. Until that occurs, we are in a very dangerous position still for Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and talk about our high time frame ranges. What we can see is Bitcoin is currently retesting the mid-level, which is a dotted trend line of the high time frame range. If we break this high time frame range up directly in the middle, this is where Bitcoin is currently sitting. This level acts as a major area of support, but also it acts as a trigger point for directional reversals. On the short-term breakdown, we saw a retest of our prior higher low. Remember, we had our high, we had our lower high, we had our lower high, we had our lower high, a support resistance flip of this level and directional continuation upwards. This is where we retested. If you recall back to our prior videos, we told you worst case scenario for Bitcoin, we would see a correction into this region before a directional continuation upwards. That is still the idea we are currently looking for. For us to see lower prices, for us to see 60,000, this area of support at 64.5k will need to break. If we break below this region, we are expecting possible corrections to 62.7 or $60,000. That is it for the bearish case scenario, okay? That is literally all we're going to be discussing. Let's go ahead and jump into the short-term price action. So as we can see, this is going to be our short-term price action for Bitcoin. We are still very much in this higher time frame downtrend. We've had multiple downtrends develop over the last 24 hours. We had a short-term downtrend represented by this diagonal trend line, which we broke out of. But if we zoom out slightly higher, the key downtrending diagonal resistance is going to be this particular downtrend we can see on the 1 hour chart. If we go to a 4 hour chart, we can see we have RSI confirmation of these pivot points on the RSI, validating this RSI trend line as a valid representation of the momentum changes over the period of price action from the 7th of June onwards. So we are looking at two things. We are looking at our bullish divergence, which has been developing on the 4 hour as a representation of this trend line, and we are looking at our current downtrend as a representation of this trend line. As you can see, the price action is moving towards an eventual apex, which is going to be the 19th of June, which is in 3 days. So therefore, within the next 3 days, 72 hours, we are expecting a breakdown of our bullish divergence trend line or a break upwards of our downtrend. The break upwards would signify a positive momentum shift and would increase the likelihood of a retest of this weekly downtrend. Remember, if we retest a weekly downtrend, we re-enter this high time frame range, the likelihood is going to be a directional continuation higher. And number two, if we break down from here, it will signify that the increasing momentum we have seen over the last 2 days since the retest and reversal has dissipated back into exhaustion, back into weakness, back into negative momentum, signifying we are likely to see another correction back to 64.4k. So watch those RSI trend lines. A break of this RSI downside would indicate that the building momentum has dissipated. We have now seen exhaustion develop. We are seeing weakness yet again. We would expect a correction back into support. Whereas a break over this trigger point would indicate we have this strength to potentially break our prior resistance and retest that weekly downtrend. Let's now go down to a smaller time frame chart. This is going to be our smaller time frame chart. What we can see over here is we have a potential descending channel formation developing, which we have broken out of. Now, the breakout of this channel has been pretty abysmal, okay? And we're going to be talking about why in just a second. One of the main reasons is the overall volume is just very, very low right now, so the market isn't really moving all that fluently. If we look at the short term over here, even on the short term price action, we are developing a nice horizontal range, which unfortunately we saw a massive wick toward the downside again, but we have managed to break back up above that region, which is a good indication. As of right now, if we take this horizontal channel at face value, drawing a measured move from point number 1 to point number 2 and applying that to the breakout point, we can see that takes us up to our neckline of resistance at 68.4k. 68.4k is a very crucial level in the short term that the bulls will need to reclaim to really bring back strength to the price action. So let's go ahead and take a look at the short term yet again, guys. If we want to see the bulls reclaim control, we need to break above the downtrend. If we want to see the short-term strength return, we need to break above our 67.2k region. And if we want to see the trend retest our highs, we need to break above that downtrend, guys. So paying attention, most importantly, to that 4-hour RSI, paying attention to the current trend. If we look at the short term, guys, my overall anticipation for the short term would be slightly bullish. The reason being, of course, we have bounced from that point number 4. We have bounced from that lower range of support. We are now retesting that major 66.2k region, which is going to be the midline, the dotted trend line. We haven't shown enough strength yet to continue upwards, but we can see that buyers are stepping in. We can see that momentum is slowly building. The question is, will it exhaust before we continue upwards? And that is a very hard question to answer. So on the short term, we have to identify trigger points. If we want to see a continuation higher, we need to take out these prior highs. We're looking at this parallel channel over here, okay? More importantly, let's go ahead and draw that one back in. We are looking at this parallel channel. We're going to drag it from here and across. This is the high level of resistance we need to claim and break over to continue upwards. And if we look at our lower side, if we're looking at our current support levels, we are looking at trading view, man. It's not working today very well for me. We are looking at our lower area of support at this region. So if we see a breakdown of this region, that is going to be a directional continuation lower. Again, you can drag that RSI trend line across and watch that trend line. If we see a break up of this region, that is going to be a directional continuation upwards. So let's go ahead and jump over to the total 3 market cap. As we can see in the total 3 market cap, there's a lot going on, but the most important thing happening here right now is that, thankfully, it is able to close a daily candle here above the low short EMA of the pi cycle indicator, the green line. Again, historically, just like Bitcoin, we have never seen, okay, a breakdown of this level at this particular phase of this cycle. If we see a breakdown of this level, it is very likely we retest our horizontal support level. This horizontal support level spans from the end of February, which lines up with the break into this high time frame range consolidation. Therefore, if we see a breakdown of this region, we are going to see an official high time frame downtrend for all altcoins, that would mark the end of that bull market support. This trend line is the bull market support for altcoins. If that level breaks down, we enter a high time frame downtrend for altcoins. It tells us two things. Number one, we have a clear invalidation, and number two, altcoins got to bounce here or they're in a lot of trouble. That is it for today's video, guys. Pay attention to that 4-hour RSI. Don't move into the weekend with too many expectations. We are not in the clear. We are not out of the woods yet. Bitcoin still has a chance to see one more correction back down to that 64.5 to 65K region. The bulls have a lot of ground to make up on the short term. We have seen a good bounce. We are starting to see some momentum rise. However, the horizontal price action, a lack of volume is not helping the bulls right now. We need to clear this level of resistance on the short term to really see some upward movement come. I hope it happens. Let's pray, let's watch, let's pay attention. Do not get too emotional. Watch your trigger points and your invalidations. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you in tomorrow's video. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. See you then.